Almost 30 years ago, around my 5th birthday, a little video game company named Square released onto the world the first entry of the Final Fantasy series. An ambitious little RPG that made such an impact that they continued to make new installments, sequels, and spin-offs, continuing to this day with the recent release of Final Fantasy 15. As any fan of the series does, I have my favorites. No two fans will ever agree on which is the best or for what reasons they enjoy any one entry, and it's one of the reasons that the series continues to be so strong to this day. That's why I'm here today. Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Featherhoof, and I'm here to discuss my personal top 5 favorite Final Fantasies. Note that this is my top 5 and a purely subjective list of my favorites. I'm not here making a definitive list of the best games in the series, as every game has their pros and their cons, but rather which one stood out to me personally. Also, we will only be discussing the main numbered entries in the series. My favorite spin-offs, sequels, and MMOs, however, will be given an honorable mention. To discuss why these are my favorites, I'm going to have to talk about their stories, and therefore, I'm going to be warning you right now that spoilers will be mentioned or discussed. So, with that said, let's leave the real world far behind and enter the world of fantasy.
Number 5.
Releasing originally only in Japan in 1992 for the Super Famicom, Final Fantasy V wouldn't see an official Western release in the States until 1999, and then on the original PlayStation. Centering on a story about two worlds that were once one, but split to capture an indestructible force called the Void, in the dimension rift between these worlds. The story picks up 1,000 or more years later when our protagonists meet one another while pursuing their own daily lives or goals, learn of the impending doom on both their home worlds, and seek to defeat the antagonist X-Death and defend the world's crystals. What particularly stands out for me is the game's 5 protagonists are all incredibly likable characters. The game has an overall light and friendly tone, and even in the bleakest of situations, the protagonist's sheer determination to see victory as a possibility and never surrender to hopelessness is incredibly uplifting. While there are sad moments, and they even hit our happy-go-lucky party pretty hard, they still get back up. And I also can't deny that Galuf's ultimate sacrifice for the party left a significant impact on me. Another fantastic part of the game is the return of the job system. Dropped for Final Fantasy IV, where each character just was a job or class, this game gave the cast a vast array of classes that they could turn into and gain abilities in at any time, each with their own weapons, armors, strengths, and weaknesses. What made it even better is after you mastered a class, you can then take that class's skills and mix and match them with another class, being able to make unique and interesting combinations to fit nearly any situation. On the downside, however, the game's story and setting are kinda simple. There's a baddie trying to do bad. You're good guys, and you gotta stop the bad guy. And that's pretty much it. However, despite its simple theme, it's written very well, and each character is given such love and care for their individual personalities, motivations, and backstories. The only annoyance being Ferris and her pirate speak. But this series did introduce many memorable characters that would become reoccurring characters throughout the series, that including the ever-memorable Gilgamesh. The game was also very challenging later in the game, which usually isn't a bad thing, but there would be enemies and even a whole dungeon where without certain class and or ability combinations would be incredibly difficult, if not downright impossible. And some of these encounters come from opening chests, and therefore unavoidable if you didn't know the chest contained that enemy and this encounter was an hour or more after the last time you were able to save. And the elephant in the room that must be addressed, yes, the end boss is an evil tree.
Number 4.
Releasing on the PlayStation 2 in the States in 2006, Final Fantasy XII takes place on the war-torn continent of Evilis, where our 6 protagonists all happen to be in Rabanastre at the same time that large events begin to unfold. They meet up, and each, for their own very unique and selfish ends, band together to stop the ambitions of the world domination of Vane and the Empire's collection of Nethicite, stones of immense power granted to people of the past by the gods of Evilis, the Acuria. All of the world, war, and political strife, however, serves as a backdrop for focus on our protagonists and what each of them individually are going through. 2 main themes permeate this game. Firstly, there's the often revisited theme across many Final Fantasies, that of loss. Here specifically, the loss of family. Every party member has lost their family, either through death, abandonment, or they themselves left them. They each deal with it in a real and relatable way, and makes the characters feel incredibly deep, in my opinion. Secondly, the theme of freedom is constantly addressed through the game. Van wants to be a sky pirate to free himself of the lowly life of a street rat he's found himself in after the death of his family. Balthier and Fran each left their own families for different reasons to pursue freedom. Freedom from responsibility, freedom from pain, freedom from stigma, freedom to see the world. These are all brought up many times and push most of the characters forward. Those that aren't pursuing revenge, at least. With the introduction of Final Fantasy XII came a major change to the battle system. In this installment, giving it sort of a faux MMO feeling. While it's still basically an active time battle fighting system, they changed the combat so there were no more battle screens you had to transition into to fight. It all happened in real time on the field. And you can only control one character of your active 3 party members. I don't mean at a time, I mean period. To get around this, they introduced the Gambit system. It's a flowchart that you set up a series of conditions and situations so that your party will do what you want them to do, when you want them to do it, but without having to stop the flow of combat and allowing you to focus on what you're doing with your controlled character. Progression is still your traditional level up, but that only affects your stats. To learn skills, get the rights to wear certain armors and wield certain weapons or perform magic, there's the license board. A lot like Final Fantasy X Sphere Grid, but different in a key factor. You can go in any direction on the license board as you wish, as you earn points to do so. However, there are skills and espers that only one character can unlock. So, even if you take all 6 characters across the exact same path, there will still be characters with exclusive quickenings and esper summons to encourage changing up your party when the need calls for it. Not all of these techniques, quickenings, and espers are useful, however. In fact, some are downright useless. In my personal opinion, I do not like the esper system they used in this game. They mimicked Final Fantasy X, and the espers stay by your side, fighting by the one person who summoned them until they're killed or they use their ultimate move. Some of which have conditions that make them so hard to pull off, you may never see them. The game world is also enormous, and within that large world are a large number of side quests, ranging from irritatingly easy to ridiculously hard. For a completionist, like myself, the sheer number of side quests that can be completed at any one time felt like a major time sink. Also spread across this huge world are treasure chests, as you'd expect from a Final Fantasy. However, these chests will not produce a single item, but one of a few that will drop randomly at percentile intervals. These chests respawn when you leave and re-enter an area, so you can try to get the desired item if you know what the chests can produce, but the chests don't always respawn. It too has a random chance of spawning when you enter an area. It felt like the game padded itself with a lot of busy work. But for all the game's pros and cons, there's really only 2 major cons for me that push it down on the list.
Number 3.
Released in the States in 1997 was the first Final Fantasy I ever owned and played, Final Fantasy VII. reintroducing the world to RPGs through objectively misleading ads and commercials that focused solely on the game's cutscenes. 7 was an entry point into the series for a great many people, not just me. Set on the world of Gaia, an energy company and world military power known as Shinra is sucking the planet dry for profit and power. Our main protagonists, members of an environmental terrorist organization called Avalanche, an ex-soldier they hire by the name of Cloud, and tag-alongs they find along the way, must stop Shinra before they bleed the planet dry, while simultaneously fighting off Genova, who is a being from space also referred to as the Calamity from the Skies, and the former first-class soldier himself, and one of the series' most popular antagonists, Sephiroth. While each of the very unique, interesting, and memorable characters gets plenty of time in the spotlight and allowed to shine, the game focuses a lot on Cloud and Sephiroth, and the theme of identity, and what that can do to a person when that identity is damaged. Cloud joins Shinra military as soon as he's old enough and able to, in the hopes of joining the elite members of the military known as Soldier, but can never manage it. He remains a lowly grunt, which you would expect would damage his ego and leads to self-doubt and depression. His spirits are often lifted by his friend and Soldier member, Zack, who keeps trying to encourage him and tell him he'll make it one day. He and Zack both idolize Sephiroth, so when Sephiroth unexplainedly slaughters Cloud's family and entire hometown, burning it to the ground, and he's forced to kill his former idol, that does further damage. After it appears he's done so, and before he's able to process what's happened, he's experimented on by the demented Dr. Hojo. Zack helps him escape while he's incapacitated due to Mako poisoning, but when Zack dies right in front of his eyes too, his mind can't take it, and he develops a serious multiple personality disorder and false memories to protect himself from his own harsh reality. This leads to him being an unlikable douche by the events at the start of the game, and it's only as he slowly comes to grips with the truth across various points in the game, finally leading to a point where Tifa, in Cloud's mind, helps him come to grips with reality and mend his mind, that he goes through a major change as a character. It's an amazing personal story among those of the rest of the cast. The antagonist, Sephiroth himself, goes through this theme of identity as well. After becoming the ultimate first-class soldier that he is, he comes to find out all the lies surrounding his birth and life. And much like Cloud, he can't take it. However, he spirals into a madness and rage, turning from a calm and collected individual, a hero of the people, into one who's heartless, sadistic, and murderous, complete with a messiah complex. Having been born by infusing a fetus with Genova cells, he professes Genova as his real mother and proclaims that he's the chosen one who will lead the planet and carry out Genova's will. Around these two mentally damaged individuals do we see a tale of fantastic proportions, involving coming to terms with oneself and the cautionary tale of ignoring the warning signs of those who are having real problems. However, alongside this deep tale of self-discovery, loss, acceptance, and healing is a heavy-handed and forced moral of environmentalism and the pitfalls of crony capitalism with Shinra that kind of cheapens the other theme with its nature will always prevail over technology and those who abuse power always get their comeuppance. And on top of it all, we have the forever memorable death of Eris that ruined my party forever by removing her OP level 4 limit break from my available options. There was also extra story into the background of not just the world at large, but isolated events that you could attain by acquiring the game's two optional characters, Yuffie and Vincent. Not necessary for beating the game in any way, but they added so much, either in the addition of whole other subplot, area, and fights, or in revealing hidden backstory you wouldn't get otherwise. Plus, their skills also added a lot to your team in combat. This game's form of attaining skills and magic come in the form of materia, which is, in my opinion, the best system the series ever had. You equip various colored stones called materia onto slots in your weapons and armor that give you the stone's abilities. Keeping it equipped would level it up, affording you more powerful versions of that stone's abilities until it was maxed out and it would duplicate itself. You could mix and match these stones as you saw fit to create all kinds of combinations, and certain characters, based on their stats, would obviously be better suited to certain materia than others. The only problem with this system is that it was possible to create combinations of materia that could almost certainly predict victory. This game also had plenty of mini-games to entertain you with if you needed a break, but none is more remembered than the grind for the golden chocobo. While an incredible time sink, having to keep returning to the gold saucer to raise your chocobos constantly, it did have a major payoff in otherwise unobtainable items, gear, and materia from riding each of the many breedable chocobos around the world. While the game had many flaws in its translations, grammar issues, and an inconsistent art style, it still remains one of the most fun times I've ever had with an RPG.
Number 2.
Releasing in the States in 1994 for the Super Nintendo, Final Fantasy VI sets the stage for the technological-dominated world of Final Fantasy VII, with its world where magic was a rare thing entirely, and an industrial revolution of sorts is on the rise, with a war raging between the Gestalian Empire, who wish to conquer the world by means of kidnapping espers, people and animals turned into magical beings by one of 3 gods that warred in ages prior to the game, and then using the Esper's life essence to imbue people and machines with magic, and the rebel faction known as the Returners who are trying to stop them. This game, instead of focusing on a single character or a small group, has a large ensemble cast. The game's major themes focus around the ensemble cast and their past. Firstly, and most notably, they use the good old theme of loss. Nearly every character has lost something or someone important to them, and that leads into the secondary theme of searching for a meaning to go on. Each character has to find their own meaning and will to continue living, despite their own individual and collective losses, and how they find that will, through their own efforts and the support of other members of the cast, create and weave so many wonderful sub-stories together to make this one near-perfect whole. Each character is completely unique, each having his or own unique ability that only they can perform, and even sporting their own musical themes. Even though by the end of the game, through equipping espers, you can give every character every magic, each character still remains unique via their exclusive skill or skills, or even, in some cases, ways of fighting altogether. One of the things that makes this game so great is that it feels like 2 games in one. Almost like a game and its sequel together on one cartridge. There's the first half, and then, and this was pretty striking to me the first time I played it, the party loses. The world is torn asunder, and the world map massively altered. Then the game picks back up, and despite this end of the world, the party reunites, fighting their own will to go on and reasons to continue living and fighting, and taking the fight back to the man who defeated them before, Kefka. Kefka, who is easily one of the best antagonists the series ever invented, attains what few other villains in the series has. He literally became God. His view that life, hope, and people are meaningless, so just screw it, while reveling in his own sadistic love of death and destruction, is matched against the party's will to find something worth fighting for, even in this destroyed world. And a truly epic final boss showdown happens under one of the best end boss themes ever. And that laugh! Who can forget his evil laugh? If I were going to gripe about anything, it would probably be that one of the game's greatest strengths is its greatest weaknesses. Its very large ensemble cast. It gets hard to get attached to many of them when you're asked to invest in so many of them. And when you can only have a party of 4 at a time, many get left out of battles or unused entirely. Also, having so many and trying to tell all their stories does, at times, make the narrative feel a little disjointed as it jumps from plot thread to plot thread. This is usually handled very well, and transitions are handled fluidly, but the sudden jump does happen every so often and breaks the flow. Also, there are optional characters here, like in Final Fantasy VII, but here, they don't serve a story purpose, and don't add anything by recruiting them, or at least any that I can remember, which could say something about my memory, or it could say something about their significance, I'm not sure. They can be recruited or ignored, and you wouldn't really miss anything other than a few extra characters to pad out your already swollen ranks for when you take on the final dungeon as 3 parties of 4 through Kefka's Fortress. Not to end this on a down note, however, and further proof of this game's greatness, I only need to point to one scene, and you know what it is if you've played this game. Before I reveal my number 1 pick, allow me to show you some of my favorite honorable mentions and spin-offs.
Number 1.
Released on the PlayStation 1 in the States in the year 2000, Final Fantasy IX stole my heart and kept me entranced with its world, characters, and music. Even before its release, there was this amazing Final Fantasy IX and Coca-Cola collaboration ad in Japan that made its way around the then primitive internet, and it looked amazing. Set on another world named Gaia, 8 people from completely different backgrounds must come together to save the world from a mad world-conquering queen, an artificial life form manipulating events in an attempt to find a way to surpass his own mortality, another planet that should have died a long time ago but has been extending its life by leeching life and souls from other planets, and a being summoned by all this death that wishes to reduce everything to nothingness. Although that last one kinda comes out of nowhere at the literal very end, which has always been kind of weird. Just from that, you could probably tell that the main theme of this game is the meaning of life and death, the cycle of life and death, and finding meaning in one's existence. While each character goes through their own arc pertaining to this, none exemplifies this theme more than Vivi. Being a black mage, and thus an artificial life form, he has an extremely short life by comparison of the other species on the planet, and seeks meaning in his brief existence, jumping from one conclusion to another until finally coming to the simple yet powerful idea that his meaning of life is to just live life, so that he can continue to exist beyond death in the form of memories that are being passed to those that come after and hopefully inspire others. Kuja, the game's antagonist, also being an artificial life form, albeit of a different sort, is driven mad by his mortality, and learning that his death is soon to come, he's driven mad and decides that life isn't worth living if it's so short, and comes to the conclusion that life should just end. All of it. Much like the last entry, each character is unique, both in appearance and skills, but this one takes it even further. With the exception of many passive skills, each character has their own set of individual skills. Zidane is a thief with dagger attacks and skills. Garnet is a summoner and part-time healer. Aiko is a healer and part-time summoner. Vivi is a black mage. Freya is a rat lady dragoon wielding a spear. Kina is a hungry blue mage. Steiner is a knight with sword skills and sword magic if Vivi's in the party with him. And Armorant is a monk/ninja combo. Their attacks and skills are uniquely their own, and it's upon you to find the party that best suits your needs. I only regret that there were no other skill combinations like Steiner and Vivi, however. Having only these 8 characters to focus on gives the game a strength that 6 lacked due to its vast ensemble. By there being only 8, not only do the characters' individual stories really shine and can be retained, but they feed into the overarching story and remain relevant all the way through to the game's conclusion. This game, like 7, also had a few mini-games here and there, from jump roping with little girls to the dreaded, at least in my opinion, Tetramaster card game. It served no purpose other than to collect more cards, to play more Tetramaster, to get more cards, to play more Tetramaster, on and on and on. It served no purpose, and I didn't particularly find it fun. The completionist in me had to collect all the cards, however, so it was an irritating slog. The original PS1 version also had absurd loading times. This was especially noticeable when you get into fights. The transition swoosh would occur, and there would be a long period of time where there was just a black screen while you listened to the opening riffs of the fantastic battle music, which, by the way, this was the last Final Fantasy where Nobuo Uematsu was the sole credited composer on the music, and it was his most prolific by far, with over 100 amazing tracks that really brought the already brilliant world of Final Fantasy IX to another level altogether. The story, the music, and the tone of this game remain to this day phenomenal. The many events and side stories littered throughout this grandiose tale are all incredibly memorable. This game, I feel, is not only an amazing game for any fan of Final Fantasy to play, but the one I always tell people who haven't played any Final Fantasy to play. The graphics may be incredibly dated, but the recent cleaned up and up-resed re-release on mobile and PC makes that problem more tolerable for graphics wars. Still, if you want an incredibly deep game with diverse and moving characters, and an ending that'll leave you teary-eyed with happy, play Final Fantasy IX. And there you have it, the list of my top 5 favorite Final Fantasies. Do you disagree with my list? Did I get anything wrong? What are your personal favorite Final Fantasies? Leave your opinions and corrections in the comments below. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.